How's everybody doing? You're great. Yeah, you are. We got football that matters in January. How about that? I'm very excited about this. If you had told me, like last summer that the Bears would be playing in the playoffs this weekend and IU would be playing for a national championship, the phrase that comes to mind for me is, who would have thought? Who would have thought? Actually, would you say that phrase out loud with me? Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that the Bears would be the NFC North champions? Who would have thought at halftime of last week's game, when my nephew Packer fans were texting me and regretted it so deeply later on? Who would have thought that we would be where we are today? It's so interesting to me. Last night I was at a dinner where Tom Thayer was the speaker. Tom's one of the radio voices of the Bears and was part of the 85 Bears team. And one of the things he said last night is, he said, when Ben Johnson walked into the building, everything changed. He said all the coaches, a string of coaches before Ben Johnson, said what was supposed to be said at the press conference, but when they walked into the building, nothing actually changed. But when Ben Johnson walked into the building, everything changed. And who would have thought? Ben Johnson. That's who would have thought. Who would have thought? Well, apparently Caleb Williams. That's who would have thought. But as great as the Bears story is, let's talk about IU for a second. I mean, who would have thought the Hoosiers would be playing for a national championship in football? I looked up the stats on this. Did you know that if you laid down, I'm not suggesting sports betting, just so you know, your pastor is not recommending that you engage in sports betting. But if you had engaged in sports betting in a serious way last summer, Indiana was a plus 100,000 to be national champions this Monday night. So I just want to say, if anyone in this room placed a serious bet last July, I would like to meet you after the service. For two reasons. One, I would like to meet someone who has prophetic gifts. All right, that's a good religious thing to do. And also, I will be asking you for a serious donation to our future plans that we have as a church. Who would have thought, right? Now here's the thing. Kurt Signetti thought. Fernando Mendoza, does that guy do a great interview or what? Apparently he thought, and he thought long before we thought. And there was something that has changed in our minds since last summer, but it had already changed in their minds last summer. And here's the thing. I love sports. I like talking about it. But these things in the whole scheme of life are not all that important unless you're the coach or unless they're the QB, right? It was their mindset that needed to change that then flooded out all around it. And, when it comes to the Bears and IU, you're not the coach and you're not the QB. Your mindset does nothing for what's going to happen this weekend. But you are the coach of your family. And you are the quarterback of your life of faith. And you are the CEO of your reactions in real time when something shakes you. And if you were to change your mind about certain things, it really could affect those things. I just use this as an illustration to say, mindsets really can change. They really can. And we're being invited into that. So, I've asked you to engage this practice last week. 9 weeks of mind renewal. It's a 5-week teaching series, but I'm going to have you commit to this practice of 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, using a simple scripture reading and picture that's in the Suncrest app and having a paper notebook to do some of your work. I'm asking you to do this for 9 weeks. Because if you were to change your mind, if you were to develop something in your inner life, the most important part of who you are, the part that determines all the other parts of who you are, then you and I could really, really be a better coach of our family, a better quarterback of our faith, and a better CEO of our reactions. It really can change. Now, I've been talking, of course, with people all week about these habits, and people are kind of working their way through them. I totally respect that. Some of you had habits that were similar to this before. Many of you are starting this for the very first time, and it's kind of exciting because you're reading the Bible and you're thinking about God, but it's also maybe a little frustrating because you're like, 10 minutes, it's 3 minutes. I feel like I'm done, right? I understand that. Some of you are getting interrupted, and as I said in my email today, man, if you get interrupted 5 times and you just do it 9 times this week instead of 14, I think that's still pretty good. I don't want you to feel discouraged by that. I want you to think, all right, that's 9 more times than I did it the week before. And it will feel uncomfortable and it will feel awkward a little bit. I got a text from my neighbor who's been part of our church for a little while now, and texted me Monday night like, hey, this question, what is God saying to me? How am I supposed to figure that out? I'm like, well, I don't have an answer for you by text. And actually, I'm not sure you'll get an answer like on your first day of doing this. But if you do it for 9 weeks, you'll start to notice what God's voice sounds like. You'll start to have these pathways that are in your mind get reshaped, and your thinking, your inner life will be different so that all the rest of your life can be different. So last week, we started with a scripture from Proverbs, and I had you all say this out loud with me, as I thinketh, so I am. And today we're going to the next scripture. This is from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, and it simply says, take every thought captive. Take every thought captive. I want you to say this one out loud with me. Let's say it together. Take every thought captive. One more time. Take every thought captive. Many people assume that this is impossible. Many people, maybe even you, for sure a lot of people in this room, have an assumption or a thought about thinking that says, I can't really control what thoughts come into my mind. That's what you think. I can't really control what thoughts come into my mind. I can't really control what I think about. I can't really control what I stew on. I don't have any control over the thoughts in my mind. And the scriptures in 2 Corinthians 10 and neuroscience would disagree with you. They would say, actually, you have a lot of control over what comes into your mind, what you let settle in your mind, what you let shape your thinking. That's actually entirely in your control. If you're passive about it, then it will just run you over. But if you're intentional about it, you can, get this, take every thought that comes into your mind, take it captive, do a little analysis on it, and decide, do I want that one to land or do I not want it to land? Maybe a good phrase for us to think about this with is just this, that we would be in a healthy place if we would just practice picky thinking. That when a thought tries to come into our mind, we make certain decisions about it. One of the things I do with my Saturday morning men's group, I got a group of young dads that get together every Saturday morning, is I kind of run experiments on them. So before I started this series, I was asking them to kind of be like, hey, what if you took 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, and we played with it a little bit through November and December. And I was trying to show them on the phone, like, hey, here's how you would get to the app for a reading plan and things like that. And the guy who was sitting next to me one morning, he was trying to go to this on his phone. And so I looked over, I grabbed his phone to help him out. And when I looked at his phone, I noticed he had a notification on his email that said he had about 27,000 unread emails. It just gave me anxiety to look at it. Right? I'm like, how do you have 27,000 unread emails? And some of you right now are like, I'm never showing Pastor Greg my phone. That's what I know this is how it works, right? But this is, I think, a good thing for practicing picky thinking is to almost think about it like your inbox. I mean, this is your mind similar to your inbox. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you can unsubscribe, right? You know that. Like literally, you can decide, I'm not letting that come in. And some of you, you really wrestle with your thinking, and yet every day you expose your mind to political talk shows. You expose your mind to any number of things. And I'm like, you can unsubscribe, right? Like you actually get to control in large measure what comes into your mind. And if something makes it into your mind that got around all your unsubscribes, you can block it. You can call it spam. You can say that doesn't belong in my inbox. You can decide how long things stay in your inbox. Are you going to leave it there forever? Or are you going to delete it and get out? And in the inbox of your mind, if you could think of your thoughts this way, if you could take every thought that comes in captive and practice some picky thinking, you have the chance to reset your mind, to reform and reshape your inner life so that it can reset who you are. It can build out a foundation that you currently lack. It can gird up with reinforcements the things that you want more of. This is entirely possible in our mind. So let me read you the broader passage in 2 Corinthians 10 where this comes from. It starts like this. It says, "And we live by the standards of this world. For though we live in the world, we don't wage war as the world does." So it's interesting. If you read this passage, Paul, the apostle who's writing this, who had a transformational experience, it was interesting. He would visit some churches in person and he would write letters to others, and some he would do both. And there was kind of a rumor apparently going around to Paul, or maybe word on the street is better than rumor, that this guy's really timid when he's with you in person, but he writes fiery letters. And so he's kind of talking about this reputation that he has. And he's like, oh, this is an interesting thing to think about it, both your view of me and how we all think of the world. And he's like, we should think about our thoughts. And he says, pay attention that, a lot of battles get waged, but we don't wage war. Followers of Jesus don't wage war like the world wages war. We don't use the same tools. We don't use the same weapons that they use. And what Paul is saying here is that actually the war that goes on within the mind is a much, much more important war, and one where hopefully we can actually lay down all kinds of other weapons if we could get this one right. It is important to think of your mind not as a playground, but as a battleground. That is the image that Paul is giving us. And then he says this, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, the weapons we have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension, every pride that's inside of us that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought, and we make it obedient to Christ. If you and I would embrace everything that this passage has for us, it is the journey we get to go on to reset our thinking and our inner life. And so for the rest of my time here, I'm just going to talk about the 4 weapons that get described to us, that we have available to us as our thinking gets shaped and then reshaped. What did it say at first? That we have access to a divine power. This is the power of God to demolish strongholds. Now, I don't think strongholds is a word or a term or an image that most of us are really familiar with today. So I want to spend a little time with this because it's so critical for us to understand the image of a stronghold and how that works in our mind. In Paul's day, and even you could probably think back to medieval days, a stronghold was essentially a fortress. It was something that protected things from coming in and kept things in there and didn't let them get out. Lots of times these fortresses would also be used as prisons. And these strongholds were usually set up on top of a hill in a very strategic location so that they were protected and it was tough for things to get in or out. Now, what Paul is saying is that in our minds, in the inner life that we have, you and I have certain strongholds, and it's tough for those things to get out of our mind. They have been put behind the fortress. They even maybe hold us prisoner, to mix the metaphor a little bit. And there are certain beliefs that you have about yourself that have been developed over time or by a certain experience that you've had, and that belief now shapes how you see yourself. It shapes how you see God. It shapes almost everything about you. But here's the thing. what if the belief's not true? What if you are locked in on something about yourself or about God and it's inaccurate? It's a misperception, not an accurate perception, but you're living your whole life by it. Then what you're going to need to do is to destroy the stronghold. So let me talk to you. I really think the only way this message is going to matter this weekend is if you can identify strongholds in your life, that if you changed your thinking about those things, it really could change your life. Strongholds get built in a number of ways. One of them is that we have an experience in life, and it's just an experience. Maybe it's even 2 or 3 or a series of experiences woven together. And after we've had the experience, we assume it now as our identity. No longer in our mind is it something I did or something that was done for me. It has shifted to where we would say something like, well, it's who I am. It's just the way I am. And the moment something takes root in your mind that says, that's who I am, or that's just the way I am, you can guarantee that that is a stronghold. You have given up fighting it. You have yielded yourself to say, well, I guess that's my identity, and now I will work myself out of that. I made a list of a number of things that I see pastorally over the years, and I'm curious whether any of these things are yours. And you'll see pretty quickly how certain experiences that we have start to become our identities. I hear people say this all the time. I know I shouldn't worry so much, but it's just the way I am. Stronghold. It's not just the way you are. It doesn't have to be your identity. But if you've kind of given up and you say, well, that's the way I am, then it absolutely will be the way you are. You know, one of my favorite it's not a biblical proverb, it's a proverb I've heard and used for a long time that now has shown up on a popular commercial, is the proverb that says this: whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Because these are the ideas that have taken root in our head, and they are self-fulfilling prophecies in that way. I know I shouldn't be so critical, but it's just the way I am. And everybody downstream from you who gets your negativity, your critical comment, your huffing and puffing, your orientation to kind of amp up with some anger. I mean, you're the coach, you're the QB, but you've decided this is my identity. It's not your identity. That is a stronghold that the evil one would love for you to hold on to, and you're responsible. With what I've done, God couldn't care about me. With what I've done, God couldn't forgive me. It's not true. But if you believe that it's true, if you tell yourself that story enough, these become strongholds. And if you are the kind of person who believes you are too far gone that God could not forgive you, do you think that's going to affect you? Of course it will. It's not right. It's entirely false, but it will shape everything about how you build out your life. My staff dropped the ball. So that means I have to control everything. My kid's not responsible, so I have to control everything. Make the list. You had an experience once. It was true that somebody dropped the ball, but somehow that experience turned into an identity for you. And now you are the micromanager. And you are relentless. And people are worn out. Your kids are worn out. Your spouse is worn out. Your employees are worn out. Because you believe you have to control everything. That's a stronghold. My husband cheated on me. So I don't trust anybody. I mean, these are powerful experiences that we have in our life. You can imagine why they would have a proclivity to shape you and the way that you see the world, but also because one person made horrible choices. You think that means you can't trust anyone? You had a real experience of rejection. He rejected you, she rejected you, the boss rejected you, your dad rejected you. And now, you've decided you're not going to let anyone reject you ever again. That hurt a lot when it happened. And so when you start to get close to somebody, you actually sabotage the relationship. You do it. You start to do things in the relationship that would push someone else away or would disrupt the relationship in some way before you can be hurt again. It's not illogical. You had the experiences, but you have not made the distinction between the experience you have and how it has completely become a stronghold of identity that now you see the world in an entirely different way and it affects everything you do. And so, experiences are misread as identity. Neuroscience helps us with this. Mr. Hebb, one of the leading innovators in neuroscience and all the kind of things that we have today, and this was his phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. The neurons in your brain that fire together, they wire together. And so if you weren't here last week, the image that I'm trying to help people see with our brains is that, man, science is teaching us today that if you think a thought once, it's fine. If you think it a second time and a third time and a fourth time, it starts to create a belief. The more you start to think about things, good or bad, true or untrue, it starts to create kind of a superhighway in your mind. I don't know if any of you are hikers. This has always been so interesting to me when we're on a family vacation and my extended family, is going somewhere and they're like, hey, let's go for a hike. I'm always like, what do you mean by a hike? Right? Because I've had these different experiences where the hike was like 600 yards on asphalt. Like we're going to some monument somewhere and they called it a hike. I'm like, I don't think that's a hike. I've had other experiences. My oldest son and I went out and did some real hiking in South Dakota and Wyoming last year. But even that, I'm using an app that keeps me on the path, and I'm definitely not the first person on the path. I'm not Lewis and Clark here, right? Like someone had laid down the path and all we really had to do was follow the path. Now, there are some elevation changes, there are challenges to it, but plenty of people had already gone down that, and it created a path. That's the point. Have you ever tried to go on a hike where there's no path? Most of you are like, no, I have not done that, nor will I ever intend to, because it's really hard. This is the idea. If thoughts kind of have to make their way through something for the first time, they get blocked, they get tangled up, they don't land all that much. But if you have a thought over and over and over again, it starts to create a path. It makes it a lot easier to go down that road the 10th time, and the 20th time, and the 30th time. Whether it's about things that are true or about things that are untrue. And at some point, it actually kind of becomes an asphalt walkway, almost like a slide. It's passive. You can just go down that path all by yourself. And especially if you start to have these thoughts and they're tied into a highly emotional event, often in a negative way, a traumatic event. If you had a traumatic event as a child, emotion tied with a thought is like a bulldozer to create a neural pathway in your brain. And it will stick with you. It isn't a sentence in the sense that you are sentenced to always think that way. but it is the way your brain is right now. And it will take more work over time to rewire, to create a new pathway in your brain. It's entirely possible. It just comes with a lot of work. And then we have this idea of strongholds that many of them come to us from childhood or confirmation bias or from generational patterns. And I want you to notice just something about yourself right now in these three categories to say, oh, where would that be true of you? You know, the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. It's really a beautiful proverb. It's not a promise. It's not a guarantee that that's going to happen. It's an observation that things usually work this way. And in general, that passage is received positively as it should be. If you train up your children in a godly way, when they're old, the chance that they'll stay in a godly way is good. It's also true in the negative sense. If a child has an experience as a child where they feel like, if I'm going to get accepted, I better perform. This love in my family is conditional. That's what it is. It is conditional. I will receive love and I will receive affirmation if I'm performing, and I will. If you experience that as a child and you've never done any work on it, it's still shaping you today. And now you work too many hours. And now you're trying to prove yourself with your bank account or with your title or with whatever. Because what was shaping us in our childhood, we start to believe as truths of this world when it's not necessarily true. Confirmation bias. You know what this is. You have thoughts that you think. You have beliefs that you believe. They've been shaped by different things. And then here's what happens. You start going on a search for all the evidence that will affirm your beliefs. And whenever something comes up that would cause you to question your belief, you easily dismiss it off to the side. I won't make you raise your hands, but I'm very curious, like if you know what you're defensive about. I'm not asking who in the room is defensive and who isn't. We all are defensive. We're just not all defensive about the same things. And whatever you're defensive about is a perfect tell to say, oh, you're looking for some confirmation bias. You do not want to allow even a conversation about something else into your mind. And what happens is the people we come across, the thoughts that enter our minds, the things that we read, that we generally agree with, they get a soft landing in our mind. And anything that challenges this stronghold gets the wall. That's what a stronghold is. But to really do the work we all have to do on our inner life means that I will not give in to confirmation bias. This is really important relationally. You know, in your marriage, you might be in a place where you think, man, I'm not sure he can be trusted. And if that's kind of your default thought in your head, then what's going to happen to you is you're going to not notice all the times he's doing trustworthy things. And it's going to be like a spotlight the moment he does something that's not trustworthy. And it's actually not about what he's doing at all. It's about what's going on in your mind. And then there's generational patterns. These things do get handed down from generation to generation to generation. And it really matters. You know, you could have this conversation. You're like, well, from my grandpa, I got a watch. From my grandma, I got a ring. And from my great-grandmother, I got 3 generations of processing stress as worry. It just got passed down to you. And a lot of us notice these things. And we start to think when we're moving into adulthood, You know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to be like my parents. I'm not going to carry stress like they did. I'm not going to fly off the handle like they did, and then you have kids and you fly off the handle like they did. And we're all surprised. But these generational patterns, unless they're acknowledged as strongholds, they just naturally take root in us. And the scriptures are calling on us to say, it doesn't have to be that way. And Ezekiel 18 says that generational trauma, generational patterns that erode families. I hated it when my dad would go to the bottle. I'm never going to do that. Except that now you're doing it. And the greatest story, the most satisfying things to me as a pastor, and I've seen it in this church all over the place, is when a person says, that stops with me. That stops with me. Must have been wired up in my dad's brain, wired up in my grandpa's brain, but I will not pass that on to my son. That stops with me. But this is all about demolishing the strongholds. And so then we demolish arguments. And we demolish every pretension. The arguments that are going on in our mind, the pride that keeps us from being open to change. We say, man, I'm going to have to dismantle that. Otherwise, life 10 years from now is just going to be on the same path it is now. I'll be just as unhealthy then as I am now. And the way we would do that, and this is where the line is that we would take captive every thought. So I'm going to ask you this week, as you're doing this 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, to think of it in these terms. I'm going to take captive every thought. I'm going to notice which thoughts came into my brain today and which ones I should unsubscribe to and which ones I should block and which ones I should let land a little bit more. I'm going to take captive every thought. I'm going to notice where I've turned an experience into an identity and where I actually could be prone to pass down to my next generation what the previous generation gave to me that was not good, so that I can break and demolish these strongholds in my inner life. And if you think, well, what are you supposed to do with it? How would you do it? Well, he tells us that I would make it obedient to Christ. Yeah, one of the things I always wonder is like, I feel like you're, as a church, mostly responsive to my teaching and other people who teach here of the scriptures. But mostly responsive is different than immediately obedient, right? And I get it, right? You got a lot going on in your life, and I'm teaching from the scriptures, and you might even think, well, that's from the scriptures, but it's kind of Greg's opinion, and I don't have to listen to Greg, I just have to listen to the scriptures. And I understand. I want you to know I totally understand how that goes. So then this is what I think. I think, what if Jesus was standing here? What if Christ himself was standing here and he said, love your enemies? What would you do? You'd be like, I'll consider that. Would you argue with it? You're like, Jesus, that's cute, but you don't live in the real world. If I love my enemies, they're going to take advantage of me. And you would argue, you'd get defensive instead of bringing it into obedience with Christ. And if any one of you resonated just a moment ago with the sense of identity that you think, God couldn't forgive me, then can I just channel Jesus here and say, you're wrong? I would like you to bring that into obedience with Christ, the one who went and died on a cross for whatever you did. And it was enough. Friends, this is a lot of thinking. It's a chance to reset our brains. Scientifically, to create new neural pathways, but spiritually, to demolish the strongholds and practice some picky thinking. We can change our minds over time with new patterns in our lives.
Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.